Hey, in today's episode, we are going to dive into the question, are you holding yourself back from being well known? Are you playing small in some way, either consciously or unconsciously, to avoid the unavoidable? This is going to be a good one. Let's go. Welcome to All In with Allie podcast, the podcast for online business owners and entrepreneurs who are ready to create the life and business of their dreams. I am so happy you are here. How are you liking the new intro, by the way? Where we just we get to the point, I feel like this is the way, personally, as a listener of podcasts, I'm not a big fan of long, indulgent intros. You know what I'm saying? Like if somebody's listening to your podcast, they know why they're listening to it. Now, if they're new to it, I get it. If they're brand new, that might be helpful, but also they get the gist from the episode. They it's not hard to figure out, but sometimes I come across these podcasts and if this is yours, no shade. I'm truly not thinking of any podcast in particular or anybody that I know in particular. But I sometimes you'll hear these podcasts with these 2-minute long intros. And it's geez, we get it. Get to the juice. So anyway, I hope you like the straight to the point. I know you're busy. I'm busy, and not in a weird way, not in we're glorifying busy, but we got things to do. You want to learn the thing and move on with your life so you can go do other things that are a lot more important than sitting listening to a podcast, right? So anyway, I hope you appreciate that as much as I do. And I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today. Per usual, this is a very timely subject. This is something that I was just talking about with a client. It's been coming up not only with some of the women that I work with closely, but I can see how this still affects me to this day, where I still have my own work to do around this. And this makes sense because this is totally something that, for lack of a better term, new level, new double. I hate that saying, but it is a good way to say this because as you grow, when we're considering, so we're talking about being well known, making a name for yourself. So this can look a few different ways. This can look like you are just well known in your industry, right? When it comes to your specific industry, you've made a name for yourself. You're a thought leader in that section of the world. For others of you, this looks like full-blown fame. This looks like being well known in your state or your country or your part of the world or globally. For some of you, this is a goal or your destiny in some way. And then, of course, there's a lot of room in between those two, sides of the coin, or you get what I'm saying? It's a spectrum, right? But as you continue to grow, there's new levels to this. There's the moment where you're at the grocery store and somebody comes up to you and they're like, hey, or no, before even that, there's that first moment where you get the message. Maybe you have a podcast or you have a blog or something, and somebody comes out to you, they're like, and they find you on the internet. They're like, I love what you do. That's the start where you start to realize, wow, okay, I'm not doing this in vain. People are actually listening to this. And not only that, but liking it. Cool. Okay. And then there's you're in the grocery store and somebody's like, aren't you the person who blah, blah, blah? That's kind of weird. And then there's, it keeps going up from there. This level of recognition and this level of being known. I'm sure there is a point where you get, if fame is what you're going after or is in your future, there's a level where it's like, okay, you're kind of used to it. You've experienced it for a certain amount of time And it's just par for the course at that point. But I would imagine it takes a minute to get there. There's definitely levels to this. So all of that to say, as you grow, this is probably going to be something that you want to keep in check, and you want to be mindful of some of the things that we're going to be talking about in this episode, because in my experience, both myself and with some of my clients, and witnessing some of my clients and seeing how some of these things, these actions, these ways that you can kind of hold yourself back, play small, etc., I see how this can be a little insidious, where it sneaks up on you. This fear of people disliking you or misunderstanding you, or, I think those are the big things that we really want to avoid. That fear can sometimes feel louder than our knowing that we're here to do something big, and what we're here to do is much bigger than those fears. But sometimes those fears can be really loud. Okay. How this came about, let me just tell you the story first. Or one way this came about was I was coaching a client this week, actually, and she made a couple of comments that really stood out to me. She had said something about how she didn't want to be a quote pick me girl. Like she wanted to do something, and I don't need to get specific on what the thing is, but it was something in like a closed group, and she wanted to do something that was going to be a nice gesture, but she was worried that it would come off as a pick me girl. So what's a pick me girl? A pick me girl is a girl who, it's typically for girls who are trying to be like a guy's girl. Like that's, I think, where the term originated from. The chick who says things to be in favor of the dudes in the room versus the girls, even though she probably doesn't even really feel that way. The chick who's like, I love doing blah, blah, blah. And when in reality, she probably doesn't, but she just, again, wants to be in favor of the guys. That's where the term came from. But what she meant was like, I essentially didn't want people to think that I was sucking up or whatever. So she made that comment. And then as we were having a conversation later on, she had made a comment about, she has this big goal in her business that I've worked with this person for over a year. I have no doubt in my mind, she is fully capable and meant to fulfill this piece of her destiny, this really big goal that she has. But she made this comment that, like, as she works toward this big goal, she said something along the lines of, yeah, but I think back on old things that I've done in my career. Let's say like on social media, for example. She said, I think back on old things that I've done on social media, old ways of creating content. For example, like the reels, and in the beginning of reels, when they first came out, and TikTok was a really big deal and blew up during the pandemic. She was like, I think back during that time and I was so cringy. She said, I cannot believe some of the things that I created and that I put out into the world. And I'm so nervous to do something like that again, because you don't realize it at the time until you look back and you're like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And I had to stop her for a minute and I'd be like, but do you realize what you just said? You just said that you don't realize it at the time. Why don't you realize it at the time? Because at the time, that's the thing to do. At the time, you're just doing the best that you can. At the time, that was like showing up on reels, especially in the beginning. And I was this person capitalizing on TikTok when it was blowing up during the pandemic, when we had nothing else to do. Everybody was doing this. Everybody. And I would say almost everybody probably looks back on that content, myself included, and is like, wow, wow, that was a dark time. Because we were all just testing things out and playing and just saying, to hell with it. Let's have a good time. We're all here. Let's see what comes of this. And we all absolutely benefited, a lot of us, from that time. But to look back in hindsight and say, that's so cringe. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of things that we're going to look back on in hindsight and think is embarrassing, right? Like if you go and look at your parents' pictures or your own pictures from the 80s or 90s, early 2000s, trends are going to come and go. And when they become not cool, that's when we decide to throw the title of cringy on it. So I just pointed out to her that you trying to, like, this is trying to control too much of your situation. There's no way to be able to predict if what you are doing right now, if your best right now, or what your best is right now, how it's going to be perceived in the future. That's impossible. If we could figure that out, we'd all be wildly, wildly successful. There's no way to know. And that's part of the fun, because you take these risks, you put yourself out there. But if you have this really loud voice in your head that's constantly saying, don't be uncool, don't be cringe, what's so-and-so going to think? How am I going to feel about this in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Then you're going to end up holding yourself back. That's going to keep you in this box that when we're talking about being known, these two are not conducive. Like these two don't go together. Putting yourself in a box and being well known is not, like, these two things don't go together. When I say putting yourself in a box, I mean limiting yourself, limiting your creativity, limiting your choice to take risks on certain things and jump on certain trends and certain bandwagons in some cases too. You've got to allow yourself to play a little bit. And I think the underlying current here is you also have to have a level of willingness to be unliked and to be misunderstood. I said something the other day, I actually made a thread of this. And what I said was, your ability to be well known is in direct proportion to your willingness to be disliked and misunderstood. I believe this to be a fact. Because if you think, like, to be well known means that you are known by many people. You're known well, right? People know who you are for the most part. They know what it is that you do. And there's usually a lot of people. There's different levels of this, of course, but to be well known means to be known by a lot of people. So if you want to be known by a lot of people, known doesn't mean they all like you. This is impossible. There's no one person, no matter how noble they are, no matter how careful they are, that is liked by and understood by every single person that, quote, knows them. This is an impossible feat. It's a foolish feat. It's a losing game, losing battle. So you've got to have that willingness. So we've talked about this on the podcast before, this concept of more equals more. More people knowing who you are and singing your praises and being positively impacted by your work and what you put out into the world also means, it has to also mean that there are more people who are on the opposite end of the spectrum. Always. The two will always be present. There are always going to be the people that get it and that love it. And then there's going to be the people who don't get it and don't love it. And the unfortunate side of this is oftentimes it's the people that don't get it that are sometimes the loudest. So if you are consistently, like, anytime you sit down to create something, or anytime you consider doing something new or pursuing a new opportunity or a collaboration or something that's going to get you in front of new people or people in general, if you're constantly playing the game of, yeah, but what if somebody sees this and they take it the wrong way? Or what if somebody picks this up and twists it in a way that I don't mean it to be twisted? Or what if a troll comes through and says the thing that I'm scared for them to say? Or, what if my family sees this or whatever. What are you going to do? A lot of people, unfortunately, these fears are so much louder than the whispers of the what ifs, the whispers of, yeah, but have you considered what also can happen with the people that get it, the people that need to hear this, the people that have been praying to hear something like this, or see somebody like you, or hear your story, or receive your healing, your work? What about that? But it's the fear that's louder. So if you let that fear take control of the steering wheel, then you're going to go in a direction that you probably, when really considering it, wouldn't want to go, right? If you really weigh the pros and the cons of this and what it looks like to really over care what people think and being cringy and doing something that you might look back on later on and find embarrassing versus having more of a IDGAF attitude, I don't give a what attitude, these two directions are going to send you into very different outcomes. So we've got to be super present and aware of which direction are we choosing with every decision, every piece of content and thing that we decide to put out into the world. When you sit down in front of a microphone, or you step onto a stage, or you do an Instagram live, or write a caption, or write an email, or go and speak to somebody important in some regard, are you saying the thing that you really want to say? Or are you constructing it and over critiquing it and over perfecting it to avoid the unavoidable? Because that's the catch-22 here. The catch-22 of this is it's going to happen anyway. Whether you're super, super, super careful, right? Or you just go for it, there's still going to be people who don't like you, or who don't get it, or who misunderstand, or who could take your message and run with it. Could still be a point. There's content where I was super, super quote careful and trying to please everybody. And now that's the most cringe content to me. It's like, golly, do you have a backbone in your body? Do you have a voice at all? Who are you trying to be right now? That's the most embarrassing because I don't see myself at all in that. So humans are going to human, period. You can't avoid, whether you're speaking to one person or 1 million people, what that person's perception of you is going to be. That's their job. That's on them. Their perception of you is up to them. You can curate a brand, you can curate to a certain extent, but even then, it's their perception. That's on them. And I think about how fickle this can be sometimes, because you'll see people who they're having it could be just based on somebody's mood or how somebody's morning's been. Somebody could be having an amazing day and see something of yours where you are just living, you're just going full all caps you, and they could see that and they're feeling empowered that day and they're like, yes, I love that. I love that energy. I love that she's going for it. I love that she's being truly who she is, or saying the hard thing, or doing something that some people may not like, but she's doing it anyway. Or that person 2 hours later could be feeling premenstrual, or could have gotten a flat tire, or who the hell knows. And all of a sudden she's like, God, what the hell? Why is she so confident? Why is she so cocky? One minute they're loving you for being confident, the next minute they're disliking you because you're cocky. And it's like, I'm the same. It's you that's shifted the lens that you're perceiving me through. You cannot control that. So when you realize this, when you realize that you are potentially holding yourself back for something that's going to happen regardless, that's when it's like, whoa. You're telling me I can't avoid this even when I'm trying to play safe. Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Okay, so why am I playing safe? Because the only person that is negatively affected, or the most negatively affected from you playing small, is yourself. Because that's going to limit the amount of people that you impact, the amount of people that see you. That's going to limit your potential. Yes, it does. Of course, it hurts the people that need the thing that you share too, because less of them are going to see it. But you're just playing yourself. An example that I gave to my client, I don't know. At first I was like, I don't know if this is a good example, but the more that I think about it, I'm like, I think this is actually the perfect example. But the example that I gave to my client when she was thinking about like the content she's creating now and potentially looking back and thinking it's cringe, or, you know, just these ways that we play with our minds. I gave the example of Kim Kardashian. And the reason why is because this woman, if you go and look at the beginning of her journey, which we all know what it is, she got famous from a sex tape, right? She was like kind of well-ish known, you know, she was friends and, you know, maybe like a personal stylist or something to Paris Hilton, like, but she was the chick in the background until she was a chick in the sex tape. And that kind of put her on the map. And then, you know, with the reality show capitalizing on that time too. And like, if you look at her come up, I would imagine when she thinks back on some of these things, how she must feel about them. And I'm sure she's made peace, considering like fast forward however many years, 10 plus years, she's now the founder of a multi-billion-dollar company, in addition to many other things that she's done and accomplished. And we can argue all day long, like, is that really her doing? But like, we're just looking at the facts here. I'm sure she's made peace with it. It got her somewhere. And I realize, and we can argue too, like, did she put out the sex tape? Was that her and her mom's doing, or was it not her doing? Was it really something that she had no control over? We'll never know, probably. But regardless, like, even take the sex tape out of it. Like, if you look at the beginning of her journey, I'm sure there's a lot of things that she did. She was like, oh my gosh, that's a little embarrassing. That's something I'm not necessarily proud of, or that's something I probably wouldn't do today. Maybe she doesn't regret doing it then because that's just where she was at. But I don't foresee her posing in Playboy today, for example, because she doesn't have to. She didn't have to then, but that's just part of her journey. And we can't argue that that was part of the journey that got her to where, that got her the level of fame and recognition that she parlayed into a wildly successful career, an unbelievable career. We can't argue that. Am I saying that we all need to take her route? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. My point is, there are going to be stepping stones to your journey that in the moment, you're going to be like, I don't know. This doesn't, how is this going to be perceived? You know, you're kind of overthinking it. And there's going to be stepping stones where you think it's the smartest move of all time. And then fast forward a year and you can't believe you did that. It doesn't matter. It's a stepping stone. As long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're being true to yourself and doing your best for right now, to me, that's all that matters. We're all going to make decisions that we look back on that we're like, okay, I'll choose differently next time. And then we're going to make decisions that we're like, wow, I can't believe I went for that, because that was the thing that was the catalyst for this next thing and this next thing and this next thing. So being well known means also being willing to be unliked, being willing to be misunderstood. That, like, they are in direct proportion to each other. And again, the reason why is because if you are not willing to walk with the reality of being misunderstood, being disliked, doing something that you might look back on later and regret, then you're just going to keep doing the same thing that you're doing now, and you're probably not going to grow very much, right? That's what it means to play small, to avoid growth opportunities and potential catalysts for your career, things that you genuinely want to do out of fear of the worst case scenario of what could happen. That's what that means. To walk with these things means to move forward anyway. That doesn't mean it feels good. And that's something that I was talking about with my client. I was like, imagine the level. And actually, I like watching the Kardashians now. Like, I watch the new episodes mainly because I think it's fascinating to watch how they navigate this level of fame and this level of hatred. Like, everybody has something negative to say. And if you bring up the Kardashians, it's like, that somebody rolls their eyes and they're like, yeah, but they're famous because of blah, blah, blah. And it's like, everybody's all up in their business. And yes, they put themselves in this position for sure, but they're still human. They still see the comments. They still see, it still affects them, but a lot less than it used to. So even though they know, okay, I need to do this specific thing, and I know that half of the planet is going to make fun of me, call me this, call me that, say that I'm this, say that I'm that, but I've still got to move forward. It probably gets easier as you continue to experience it. You do become more numb to it. So yeah, being well known equals being or willing to be disliked. How much can you handle? How much are you willing to walk with in the pursuit of the life that you are here to create, the impact that you were uniquely made to have on this planet, in your industry? So I was thinking of, okay, if you are somebody who's listening to this and you're like, okay, I know that I struggle with this. I was trying to think of ways I can support you more than just bring up this concept and make you aware of it, which I do believe is a big start. But if I could support you in letting go of the fear, what would that look like? So the first thing that I think needs to happen in any situation that you're navigating where you're like, okay, I want to do this thing. I want to say this particular thing or pursue this opportunity or something, or just like even taking baby steps to growing a brand, is you moving toward being more well-known in whatever respect makes sense for you and your business. The first thing that we need to do, like as you encounter something where like, what are people going to say? What is this? And you start to overthink. Those fears start to become louder than the what if possibilities, the things that we actually need to be focusing on. The first thing that we need to be doing here is we've got to weigh the cost of being known versus never letting yourself be known. What is we could even get more specific. So let's say there's something very specific that you're considering, but you're like, man, but what if this? So let's say you have an opportunity to go on a podcast and discuss a disagreement. Like maybe you have a stance on something that is unpopular and you have an opportunity to go on a podcast and talk about this and be questioned for it. So on one hand, there's going to, you're going to be put under the microscope and making yourself susceptible to scrutiny. But on the other hand, you're sharing something that you truly believe in, and you're given this opportunity to be on a platform with an audience of people that think differently than you, and you're giving a different perspective, and you could maybe bring some people to your side. Like this could be a really cool opportunity, but you're like, I don't know. What if they're mean to me? What if I can't answer these questions? What if I get all this hate or I make a fool of myself? So you would want to weigh like, what's the cost of doing that? And what's the cost of not doing that? So you can do this same situation, this same practice with just, broad being known or being unknown, or something very specific if you're weighing a certain opportunity. But for our purposes, let's talk about the cost of being known. What does that look like? What are you going to have to walk with if you continue to pursue being known in whatever respect makes sense for you? First thing, which we've already talked about, being disliked and being misunderstood by some. We've talked about that. The next thing, the cost of this might be some of you have pasts that you're afraid might come to haunt you. Maybe there's something that you've done or said in the past that might come up and you're going to have to address it. Maybe and you're probably likely is going to happen is higher levels of pressure. When you're more known, sometimes you have more to lose. So these are some of the things that you're just going to have to be okay with. Not saying you're excited about it, not saying it doesn't hurt you. You're still human, but you're like, okay, is it worth it to be known, to go for this opportunity? And then you want to weigh the cost of never letting yourself be known, continuing to play small based on fears. What is that impact, or what is that cost to you? So the big one is only supporting and helping and impacting a fraction of the people that you could. For some of us, this is a really big deal because a big part of your mission, or at least that you say is your mission, is to change the world, to change a demographic, to truly, truly make an impact. So if you have a fear of being known and you want to make a huge impact for a certain group of people or the world, these two things don't mix. It can't happen. So you only impact a fraction of the people that you can. You're likely not living your fullest potential because of that fear. You're not going to take opportunities. You're not going to say the thing that you want to say. You're going to water down your message out of fear. And for most of us, that's probably going to lead to possible regret later on. Or wondering, what if? That's a good question to ask. What is worse? Looking back in 10 years and feeling maybe a certain amount of cringe, but also a certain amount of like, yeah, but I went for it. And this thing led to this thing, which led to this thing. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Or I met this person, or, whatever. I followed my heart. It wasn't my, I wouldn't do that today, but I see now in hindsight where this led me, and I'm grateful. Or, I didn't take that leap. I didn't do that thing because I was much more concerned about the negative that could happen from taking that risk, from allowing myself to be seen and heard and known. I didn't do it. The fear was louder. Therefore, I didn't go for it. So I don't know. I don't have it. It's not cringy because it never happened, but who knows what could have transpired from me capitalizing on that opportunity or saying what I wanted to say. So when you weigh these two, the cost of being known or the cost of not letting yourself be known, I'm not saying everybody here is going to choose to be known and go for the thing, because maybe not. Maybe for some of you, that cost is much more than possible regret. Great. But at least have that level of awareness and consciousness to ask yourself those questions and to make that conscious of a decision for yourself. And then the second piece to this, if you're wanting to let some of this fear go, The next thing that I would do is I would ask yourself, who are you doing this action for? So let's say again, you have this very specific opportunity. Okay. You have this opportunity to go on the podcast or write the piece or speak on the stage or, go all in on your brand or your business or whatever. Like you're faced with this opportunity. And again, the perk of that is being known and impacting positively the people that you are here to support. And then the flip side of that is some people maybe not getting it, not liking you, the other things, the cost of being known type stuff. So there's two sides of this coin here. Before you decide on that action, I want you to ask yourself, who are you doing this action for? The haters or the potential haters, or the people that it's meant for? So anytime you decide to not move on something out of fear of, again, somebody else's perception, you are making a decision for a hater or a potential hater. You are living your life based on somebody who doesn't like you or possibly wouldn't like you versus somebody who, again, prays for your message and your heart and your soul. That's big. And then a way to take this deeper too, if your fear is like what people might say about you, this fear of trolls, this fear of your past coming to bite you, or we all have insecurities. All of us do. And one of the worst things to experience is when a troll or when somebody comes and you shouts out your biggest insecurity. That is awful. It's one thing for somebody to say something that's like, okay, that's not even true. That's stupid. Or like, clearly you're just whatever. But it's another thing when they pull out the thing that you are the most ashamed of or insecure of or scared of or whatever. So how you can handle this, if this is something that is holding you back in some way, is say it first. That's one of the most surefire ways to take the charge and take the power back, is to say it first, own it. Hey, I'm actually really insecure of this thing. Hey, actually, I've done this in the past and it might come up later on. Not proud of it, or this is why I did it. Not saying you have to do that, but it's an option. And you see a lot of, I think it's politicians that do this, and they're actually trained to do this, especially with their past, is like, get out ahead of it. What is something that if you're about to be really well known, like people will find the thing. So if you come out and you own it first, now you've taken that power out of somebody else's hands. You've said, yep, I've done this. I've done whatever. It is what it is. Like, say what you need to say. I'll own it. I take responsibility for it, but at least you're hearing it from me and not somebody else. That's power. Yep. Super insecure about this thing. I hate this situation. I hate that, whatever. This about myself really gets my nerves. Great. Now, if you're a troll, I've already said that. What are we doing here? You're wasting my time. Find something else. It just it takes the charge out of it. It takes that when somebody says it, it's like, okay, and I've already catch up, be better. And then the last thing here, if you know that fear is being louder than the positives of you being known, is you've got to put more effort and energy in thinking about the potential and the good that can come out of you being known or you capitalizing on an opportunity versus only the bad. It is so easy that, again, that fear is loud. Fear is always louder. We can train our minds. We can practice giving more energy to the positive, to the good. Both are going to be there at all times. I've said before, you can walk into any room, you can look at any person and see the good and the bad of that room, of that person, of that situation, of whatever. Like both will always be there. That's duality. But can you spend more time visualizing and dreaming and speaking out loud the good, the potential, the good potential versus the bad and the thing that you fear? Because if you're able to do that, chances are you're probably going to move in the direction that you actually want to move and start to fulfill the destiny that you actually want to fulfill versus being destined for something else because you're scared of people not getting it or something happening that may or may not even happen. Okay? So I'll say it again. Your ability to be well known is in direct proportion to your willingness to be disliked and misunderstood. And I pray, just like everybody else in your world who needs what it is you have to put out into the world, into your industry, I pray that you allow yourself to move forward and you allow us to really know you. The world needs that, and so do you, on whatever level that looks like. Okay, that's all that I have for you today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or whenever you are listening to this, and I will see you here next week.